Ohio State's quarterback Justin Fields was outstanding against Clemson in their college football playoff game. It was phenomenal. It was fun to watch. He was 22 for 28 passing, had 385 yards, 6 passing touchdowns, 1 interception. He also ran 8 times for 42 yards. And stats are great. Like, stats are impressive, and I thought he had some really great balls downfield and threw the ball vertically very, very well. Now, it's also worth giving some context. All this happened, and in the first half, by the way, he got nailed in the ribs on a third down run for a first down. And literally, he only missed 1 snap the entire game. He missed 1 snap and then came back in the game. And so pretty much half of his stats were put up with a significant injury to his ribs. And the guy was clearly in a lot of pain. And I walked away going, like, this is just such an impressive performance by Justin Fields. And clearly the talent is there. And so I'm about to make a statement, a pretty strong statement about Justin Fields. But I want to offer context. I don't want people to think that, because, look, I'm not just reacting to the moment. I've watched every game Justin Fields has played all year. I'm not just talking about this game. I'm talking about his whole body of work this year and in the past. And when you look at his year, you have to acknowledge that Justin Fields had 2 bad games. He had a really bad game against Northwestern and a really bad game against Indiana. And they were like, oh, that's some stuff on film. I'm like, I don't like that. And so it's pretty clear and obvious to me there are things that Justin Fields needs to work on. Absolutely. Sure, I acknowledge that. I own that. But also, I would draft Justin Fields without any hesitation. If he's on the board and available, I'm like, I'm taking the guy. And I don't really know what that means in comparison to Trevor Lawrence or Zack Wilson. That's a conversation for another day. But I do know that whoever ends up drafting Justin Fields, wherever he goes, that team is getting an outstanding quarterback and a guy that on and off the field, I'm a big fan of. And so in this upcoming NFL draft, Justin Fields kind of reminds me of another guy named Justin Herbert. Remember, going into last year's NFL draft, I was down on Herbert. There were some bad moments on film. I went, ugh, I know he's really talented, but despite the talent, there's a lot of stuff I'm like, that makes me hesitate on film. But Herbert got good coaching, and as he went to the NFL, and the NFL got good coaching, and he challenged all that talent he has into really high-level good quarterback play. And so I think Justin Herbert and Justin Fields are similar, where in recent years, we have seen guys who have had problems in college, some film that makes you go, ooh, I don't like that throw, or that's a mistake I don't like. But they were really talented. Guys like, Justin Herbert, we talked about him, but also Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes. And so the mistakes that Justin Fields made this year, they don't really bother me the same way they would have a couple years ago. They scare me way less because I look at, hey, he's really, really talented. And if I was a coach, I would be certain I could take Justin Fields and help him become an amazing quarterback. I mean, if you're an NFL coach and you have any confidence, you're like, yeah, this guy clearly has a ton of talent. Hey, he's got some stuff we got to teach him. No big deal. Like, he works hard. He's very talented. I think it's important to say, like, the progression he's made over the years, from year to year to year, Justin Fields has gotten better. I mean, Georgia in his first year compared to last year, compared to this year in his second year at Ohio State, his mechanics are better. He's literally throwing the ball better. He's much more comfortable reading defenses and going through progressions. And so seeing Justin Fields' steady improvement shows that Justin is willing to do the work it takes to get better. I'm like, perfect. He's talented. He works hard. If I'm a coach, I'm like, in a heartbeat, I'll take the guy. Now, let's compare Justin Fields to Trevor Lawrence real quick. There's a little bit of interesting stuff I can add. Justin Fields he moves better than Trevor Lawrence, the Clemson quarterback. He's more mobile. And if you're an NFL team with a bad offensive line, Justin Fields is more likely to succeed with you than Trevor Lawrence because Justin Fields can run and extend plays. The same way we've seen to probably a greater extent than Justin will, Deshaun Watson or Jalen Hurts or Russell Wilson. Like, if you can move, that's a key good part of your game. And we saw in the college football playoff game, Trevor, under heavy pressure with the bad offensive line, struggling, losing one-on-one matchups. He's not very effective. So Justin's mobility, I think, is a huge asset that if I'm a team with a bad offensive line, I go, Trevor or Justin? Well, if we can't protect him very well, we might lean on the fact he can move around a little bit. That's worth noting. Now, Zack Wilson, the former BYU quarterback, is ridiculously talented. I really, if I were an NFL coach, I guess really the thing is talking to Zack Wilson and Justin Fields, having conversations with them face to face, getting to know them. If I was going to make a decision between the two, it'd have to come down to like, who do I work with better? Who is more receptive to coaching? Who do I vibe with better in the meeting room? Because they're very similar in talent. However, the difference between Justin Fields and Zack Wilson is that Justin runs with more power. But they both do impressive stuff that if you look at their film, you go like, there are multiple moments I watch Zack Wilson and I go, oh my goodness, that's a crazy play. And I watch Justin Fields and I go, wow, that's ridiculous. They both make me feel that way where I'm like, that's just something that's a crazy play. That's really impressive. And between Zack Wilson and Justin Fields, it's pretty neck and neck. The difference for me would have to be talking to them in person and getting on a chalkboard and seeing like who do I work with better? Who do I feel more comfortable working with in the future? But I do believe that there are at minimum, 3 really good quarterbacks in the upcoming 2021 NFL draft. You got, Zack Wilson, Trevor Lawrence, and Justin Fields. And there are going to be teams that I believe are going to pass on Justin Fields. And if you pass on Justin Fields for another position, say the Bengals draft Penei Sewell, the fantastic left tackle out of Oregon, hey, that's fine. Go get Penei Sewell. He looks like a generational talent at left tackle. But other than Penei Sewell, I don't really know what position you could draft that would kind of trump and be more meaningful than Justin Fields. Like if you are a team and you draft a corner or a linebacker or a defensive end and you do not draft Justin Fields, oh boy. I'm looking at Atlanta. I'm trying to think of another team that is up there, Carolina. Like if teams or whoever trades up, like I cannot fathom a team with an aging veteran quarterback or a team that really doesn't have unless you have a Josh Allen or a Justin Herbert or a really young quarterback you believe in, like the Bengals have Joe Burrow. I can't really imagine passing on Justin Fields. And if you do, oh man, you're going to get reminded of that for years. I mean, this is kind of a cheap shot. I admit that. But don't forget, Washington could have drafted Justin Herbert. Now, I thought they got a phenomenal player, Chase Young, who I think is going to be a great defensive end. But who's had more impact in year one? Chase Young or Justin Herbert? I mean, that kind of conversation, I think it's more of a cheap shot because of how talented Chase Young is. But that kind of conversation is going to go on and on if anybody passes on Justin Fields, because I have utmost confidence Justin Fields is going to be fantastic in the NFL. Now, I do have an outsider perspective on what I'm about to say next. I don't know Justin Fields. I've never met the guy. I don't even know anybody so there are some teams around the nation that I have an inside track on. I don't have one with Ohio State. But I believe with an outsider's perspective looking in, I would imagine it had to be a year of growth off the field for Justin Fields because he's had all this Heisman hype. He's gotten all this attention. And he's been everywhere in the media. And then against Northwestern, he had some bad play. Northwestern, the Indiana game. He held on to the ball a bit too long. He tried to make big plays. He tried to, I think, force plays downfield rather than throw the ball away. And I thought that those mistakes he made against Northwestern and Indiana were all the pressure from the media manifesting and a guy trying to deliver on the expectations that have been laid upon him. And so that's my interpretation of what would happen. Again, this is mostly speculation, but I really, from the outside looking in, I go, we've seen a guy get a lot of media attention. And actually, if it's true that this has been a really hard year for Justin, hard is the wrong word there, but a year of getting a lot of information thrown at him, and it's forced him to grow, then that's very, very good. Now, I speak from experience on this one thing. When you get a lot of attention, and it's attention that, there's this overwhelming amount of both praise, where people, for Strongman Sports, for example, people love my show. There are people that love me. And then there are people that hunt me down on social media and send me mean pictures and mean messages and all kinds of stuff. Like, I've gotten both a lot of praise from people that love what I do and a lot of criticism from people who hate what I do and hate me. So I know what it's like to get an overwhelming amount of information, both positive and negative. And when you have that coming your way, you have to learn how to manage it. And my belief is that Justin Fields has learned how to manage that kind of information being thrown his way this year. And you also have to remember that the dude's only 21 years old. So for him to have kind of a growth with the media and the growth with attention, I think is very important for him. And I need to say this too. I've seen this a lot on social media, and I've gotten a lot of messages about it, and it's driving me nuts. People need to stop comparing Justin Fields to Dwayne Haskins. It's just not reasonable. They are different players with a different skill set, with a different background. They just have happened to both play at Ohio State. I don't really think that you can look at Dwayne Haskins' failure and say, Justin Fields is going to be another failure out of Ohio State, just like Dwayne Haskins was. Justin is way more talented. I think my impression of him as a human being is he's more mature. Justin Fields has never given you any reason ever off the field to doubt him. In fact, he's only ever done stuff that has encouraged me with how he's carried himself. He's also been a starter for more years in college than Dwayne Haskins was. And so I think the Dwayne Haskins comparisons are really stupid and baseless, and they're just like different. Like it doesn't make any sense to me. I don't understand why people have this constant comparison of these guys went to the same school. They're clearly the same player. They're going to fail exactly the same. I go, I just don't buy it. I don't think it's true. I've seen a lot of people come from different schools and play really well and play really bad. And why? How come if Tom Brady was this great, amazing quarterback, how come every quarterback after Tom Brady from Michigan wasn't also amazing? Because that's not how it works. That's a stupid example. It's the only one I could think of off the top of my head. But I just hate when people compare the same, players that went to the same college and acting like they're going to have the same career in the NFL. Now, this year, the body of work I've seen from Justin Fields has given me a ton of respect for him. And his work ethic, really. He's made a bunch of improvements this year. And if I were an NFL coach, I would want to work with him. I would draft him. And I would give anybody who is, considering passing on Justin Fields, I would give those teams a warning. I'll give you a cautious warning. Do not pass on Justin Fields. I think he's incredibly talented. And some coaches are going to look at him, fall in love, and say, I'm going to turn you into a great NFL quarterback. And if by any chance Justin Fields does fall in the NFL draft, all that will do is help him. He'll go to a better and better team the farther down the draft he falls. If that does happen at all, I don't think it will happen. But I think a lot of people have been up and down, and I've kind of come to a settled position on Justin Fields. He had some mistakes, absolutely. So did Justin Herbert, so did Josh Allen, so did Patrick Mahomes. And when you have a guy who clearly works very, very hard, but is also very, very talented, that's the kind of guy that makes it in the NFL, in my opinion. And I want to say one more final thing, too. I get called a Justin Fields hater a lot. And I've made videos sharing criticism of Justin Fields. I thought last year he needed to make improvements. And then I thought that I acknowledge he had 2 bad games this year. And I'm like, yeah, there are people out there that are concerned about that. And I acknowledge, I try to be honest and open and say what I really believe. I'm not a hater of Justin Fields at all. A hater is somebody who roots against somebody. So someone who hates on Strong Opinion Sports is someone who wants to see me fail because they hate me and they don't care what I say. They're not listening to any kind of conversation. There's no redemption arc. There's nothing. They just want to see me fail. I don't want to see Justin Fields fail. I'm not a hater. I never have been. I have offered criticism of him before. I said, hey, and you can watch the Northwestern game. He did some bad stuff. So I stand by my criticism of him. But at the end of the day, I'm not a hater. And in fact, I'm actually quite a big fan. And I want to try to learn from the past where we saw Justin Herbert, a guy who had a lot of problems in college, but also very clearly a lot of talent, go from college to the NFL, and bam, he succeeded. And we've seen a trend now with 3 quarterbacks recently, Mahomes, Josh Allen, and Herbert, where they struggled in college, had some things that make you hesitate on film, but at the end of the day, if they're talented and work hard, they're going to make it in the NFL. That is why I buy into Justin Fields. He's going to be an awesome NFL quarterback, and I would draft him in a heartbeat.